There is a moment the narcissist is never prepared to face. It doesn't arrive with screaming or explosive confrontation. It comes quietly, calmly, but with enough force to shatter the entire illusion of power they've carefully constructed. That moment is when you, the one who once loved them with all your heart, look them in the eye and say, "I see who you really are." No accusations, no explanations, just that look, that sentence, and the peace in your heart as you say it. That's what terrifies the narcissist to their core, because in that moment, you are no longer their puppet. You're no longer playing the role of the forgiving one, the persuadable one, the confused one. You've seen the truth. And once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. To get to that moment, you walked through long days of inner conflict, torn between your intuition and your hope. You tried to understand them, to forgive them, to excuse their behavior. You believed that if you loved deeply enough, waited patiently enough, sacrificed long enough, they would finally see your worth and change. But the truth is, you poured your goodness into a bottomless pit, a place that never gave back, only controlled, only manipulated. The narcissist didn't love you. They loved controlling you. They loved the way you reacted, blamed yourself, questioned your own reality every time they hurt you. They built a fake reality where they were always the victim, the misunderstood genius, the kind soul in a cold world. And, in their twisted game, you were cast into a role you didn't even know you were playing. But here's what they never expected: the awakening of a super empath. You are deeply empathetic. Someone who once believed in the goodness inside everyone, even those who hurt you. But you're also the one who can see through the mask and reach the truth underneath. And once you see it, your response changes. You don't scream, you don't cry, you don't explain how badly you've been hurt. You simply stand there, calm, steady, and cut the invisible strings they once used to control you. The moment you stop seeking validation, stop hoping for an apology, stop trying to change them, that's when you reclaim every ounce of power that was stolen from you. The narcissist isn't afraid of your anger. They're afraid you no longer care. They don't fear your resistance. They fear your indifference. As long as you feel something, as long as you react, they still hold the strings. But when you're calm, not from suppression but from clarity, when you walk away without a dramatic exit or final speech, they know they've lost you forever. This video is a tribute to you, the one who once loved to the point of exhaustion, forgave beyond reason, and still found the strength to rise. This is not a revenge speech. This is a journey back to yourself. A declaration that you were never weak like they made you believe. You only needed one thing to break free: truth. We'll dive into the psychology of the relationship between the super empath and the narcissist. We'll decode why those 5 simple words, "I see who you really are," can haunt a narcissist for life. We'll explore what happens when you stop playing by their rules. And most importantly, you'll understand why you, with your sensitivity, your intuition, your compassion, and your resilience, are the one they can never control a second time. If you've ever been manipulated to the point of doubting your own worth, if you've ever been told you're too kind, too emotional, too sensitive, this is your moment to flip every one of those lies. You're not too anything. You're exactly who you are. And that is something they will never know how to handle. So watch this video to the end, because once you've seen the truth, you'll never again live in the fog. You won't need an apology to heal. You won't need someone else to affirm your worth. You'll walk forward, not in rage, not in revenge, but in absolute freedom. You weren't born to be a warrior. You were born with a heart big enough to feel the pain of others, with an intuition sharp enough to read the things no one ever says out loud, and with a soul constantly searching for deep, meaningful connection. You are a super empath, whether you realize it yet or not. From an early age, you learned how to listen between the lines. You could feel other people's emotions as if they were your own. In a world where most people rush to skim the surface, you were always drawn to the depths. You didn't just see people for who they were, you saw who they could become. And that is exactly why your wounds cut so deep. When a narcissist entered your life, you didn't see them as a threat. You saw them as a wounded soul, a heart that needed healing. You believed in potential, in transformation, in the goodness buried beneath their cold, arrogant, or dramatic exterior. You didn't fall in love with who they were, you fell for who you believed they could be, and that belief kept you holding on far too long. You forgave the unforgivable, you ignored the red flags waving at you from the start. You told yourself that if you were patient enough, if your love was sincere enough, they would learn to love you back. So you waited, you hoped, you gave until you were empty, walking a path they were never truly walking with you. But a super empath doesn't stay broken forever. There comes a breaking point where compassion no longer means tolerating pain. There is a moment when sensitivity evolves into clarity, when you've shrunk yourself one too many times to fit into someone else's mold, when you finally ask yourself, why does love hurt this much? And then you stop looking for the answer in your emotions and begin to seek it in the truth. You review the relationship, the words, the actions, the repeating patterns. You connect the dots, and suddenly it all makes sense. You weren't crazy. You weren't too sensitive. You weren't asking for too much. You were caught in a manipulative cycle where every sane response you had was twisted into something wrong. At that moment, you're no longer the one begging to be understood. You become the one who rises, with eyes wide open, a heart still scarred, but for the first time, no longer afraid. You don't need to yell. You don't need to prove who was right or wrong. You simply see it. This was never love. It was possession, manipulation, and control, dressed up in empty promises and fleeting moments of toxic sweetness. And then, you choose truth. You no longer need them to change. You no longer feel the urge to save anyone but yourself. You step back, not because you're weak, but because you've grown strong enough to know this place is no longer for you. This is the rise of the super empath. Not loud, not dramatic, not hateful, just a quiet finality, a conscious indifference, a gaze no longer dependent, and one final sentence that echoes in your mind, I see who you really are. This rise isn't just about walking away. It's a transformation in your very being. You are no longer the one desperately trying to rescue a broken relationship. You become the one who protects the wholeness of your soul, the one who finally understands that you don't need anyone else to validate your worth. A super empath isn't someone who's always strong. They're simply someone who refuses to abandon themselves one more time. You've stepped out of the cycle, and this time, you're not going back. To understand why you were once trapped in the narcissist spiral, you must know this. It wasn't random. It wasn't some unfortunate coincidence, and it certainly wasn't because you were weak or easily fooled. It was the result of a calculated plan, a sophisticated power game designed to slowly manipulate your perception, one subtle move at a time. Narcissists don't control you with physical violence. They distort your mind. They don't chain you down. They make you question whether you're wrong for walking away. They don't say, you're not allowed to leave me. They make you think, if I leave, maybe I'm the one at fault. Their control doesn't come from restraints. It comes from guilt, confusion, and the disintegration of your ability to tell what's real and what's right. Their game starts sweetly. They study you like a strategist, observing your strengths, your wounds, your dreams, your fears, and most of all, your deep longing for real connection. They mirror it back perfectly. They make you feel like you've finally found the one who gets you. And once you trust them, once you open up, once you offer your vulnerability, that's when the game truly begins. Slowly, they begin to withdraw what they once gave. Bit by bit, they make you feel like you need them in order to be loved. They create cycles of affection mixed with silence, coldness, and emotional punishment. You never quite know when you're doing things right or when you've suddenly become the problem. The only consistent thing is inconsistency, And in that chaos you begin to bend. They start rewriting reality. Their wrongdoing somehow become your fault. The pain you feel is dismissed as being too sensitive. Your real emotions are brushed aside with lines like, "You're always overreacting." And eventually you stop trusting yourself. You ask their opinion before making decisions. You feel guilty for wanting anything of your own. You apologize for having feelings. That's when they've got you. A narcissist's control doesn't land with one big blow. It comes through 1,000 tiny cuts, each one hidden behind sweet words. They make you feel special, then make you feel guilty for not being worthy of that feeling. They lift you up, then pull you down, only to rescue you from the very pain they caused. So you believe you need them to survive. But the scariest part isn't what they do. It's what you start doing in silence. You begin to defend them. You tell yourself, they didn't mean to. You cling to the beautiful version of them that showed up in the beginning, even though it was just a mask. And you give up pieces of yourself in exchange for the hope that love might one day change them. But here's what you must understand. A narcissist doesn't build relationships. They build a stage. You are not their partner. You are their audience, watching as they play whatever role they need to maintain their image. One day they're the victim, another day the hero, another the misunderstood genius. But there is one role they will never accept, the villain. And if you dare to speak the truth, if you name what they've actually done, you'll be labeled crazy, disloyal, or unstable. They'll deny, distort, and twist everything until you question your own memory. And if that doesn't work, they'll isolate you, turning you into the threat that must be removed. That's when you finally see it. You're not in a relationship. You're in a psychological war, and only one of you even knows the battle is happening. And you've been in it far longer than you realized. But remember, super empaths don't stay stuck forever. You may have been trapped, but you were never lost. And the moment you start to see each tactic for what it is, the moment you stop asking why they're doing it and start focusing on what they've actually done, that's the beginning of the end. Narcissists build their power through confusion. You dismantle that power with clarity. And once you see the game for what it is, you no longer want to play. There are words that are just sounds. But then there are words that become declarations, final verdicts, the closing of a door, permanently, between the manipulator and the awakened victim. I see who you really are. 5 simple words, no flair, no elevated tone, but they carry more weight than any emotional reaction you've ever had. It's not an accusation. It's not about punishment. It's the moment you look, truly look for the first and last time at the person in front of you and recognize them for what they are. Not someone who loved, but someone who controlled. To the average person, this sentence might open a conversation, but to a narcissist, it's the death knell of their entire control system. Because now you are no longer confused. You no longer believe in the character they've been playing. And more importantly, you are no longer afraid of the truth. Narcissists thrive on illusion. Their identity isn't built on real character, but on roles constructed to serve their manipulative needs. They can be the perfect father, the ideal lover, the loyal colleague, or the inspiring mentor, until the door shuts and no one is watching. To them, truth isn't what matters. What matters is who buys into what they create. And as long as you're still doubting yourself, still asking, am I just too sensitive? They still have power. But the moment you say, I see who you really are, you step out of their performance. You're no longer the audience. You've left the stage. And that's when they strike back. Not with remorse, but with fear, disguised as anger. They'll blame you, smear you, do everything they can to pull you back into the game. Because as long as you react, cry, or try to prove your point, they're still pulling the strings. But what truly takes the control from them isn't your rage, it's your stillness. It's the way you look at them without needing anything. It's the silence that no longer waits. It's the sentence that needs no answer. I see who you really are. They can't fight truth because they've rejected it their entire lives. They can't win if you've stopped engaging. They can't manipulate someone who no longer needs their explanations, apologies, or change. And in that moment, their entire persona begins to collapse. To them, the truth isn't just a blow to the ego, it's the destruction of their carefully constructed identity. And you, with the piercing insight of a super empath, are the only one who can truly see through the illusion. You don't need to expose them publicly. Just seeing them clearly and refusing to be drawn back in is already the end. From that moment forward, all their efforts are meaningless. They can keep acting, they can keep lying, but you're no longer watching. And that's their worst fear. Losing the stage, losing the character, losing the person who used to mirror their emotions back to them. They don't fear that you've learned the truth. They fear that you believe it. They fear you will never forget. And they're right. You will never unsee what you now know. Because once you've said, I see who you really are, you are no longer the person they once controlled. You are free. When you say the words, I see who you really are, it's not just a truth spoken aloud. It's a shift in consciousness. It's the moment you step out of the never-ending cycle of manipulation and confusion. It doesn't come in a burst of anger. It arrives in the stillness of awareness, when you stop trying to change them and begin to change the relationship between you and them, from attachment to release. But what happens after that moment? Do you think they'll stay silent and disappear? That they'll simply let you walk away in peace? No. That's a hope reserved for those who have self-respect. For the narcissist, truth is a threat. It's an invasion into a territory they've hidden their entire lives, and their first response is always resistance. When the mask is removed, they don't accept it as reality. They panic, not because they're losing you, but because they're losing control of you. They know that once you've seen their true nature, you'll never buy into the performance again. And that, for them, is the death of the world they've built through illusion, lies, and distortion. You'll see them shift rapidly. One moment they're the victim, next they're the aggressor. They may use tears to make you feel guilty, then switch to blame in a single breath. None of it is real. Each reaction is a survival tactic, to salvage the image they need you to believe in. Because if you no longer believe, they'll have to face the one thing they fear most, the emptiness inside themselves. And this is what you must understand deeply. You're not communicating with someone seeking truth. You're standing in front of someone trying to protect an illusion. They'll do anything to pull you back in. Smearing, playing victim, emotional attacks, creating a new story where you are the problem. All of it is designed for one thing, to make you react. Because once you react, whether with anger, sadness, or an attempt to explain, you're still playing by their rules. You're still trapped in the performance, still validating the role they want you to play. They don't need your love. They just need your engagement. Your attachment is their fuel. And you, as a super empath, are the most valuable source of fuel they've ever had. But this time, you're different. This time you see clearly. You no longer believe that your reaction will change them. You're no longer analyzing whether they truly love you. You don't need a late apology to soothe wounds that still bleed. This time, you're no longer moved by the performance. You see through the intent behind it. And in your gaze, no longer dependent on them, they feel something they'll never admit. Fear. Not the fear of losing love, but the fear of being seen, of being truly understood, of being exposed. The fear of no longer being able to manipulate someone who has awakened. When you stop trying, stop explaining, stop waiting. It's not coldness. It's the end of a cycle, a quiet but firm conclusion. And that holds more power than any retaliation, because it doesn't come from emotion. It comes from clarity. Your indifference isn't a sign you don't care anymore. It's the proof that you've risen above it. From here you'll experience a range of conflicting emotions. There will be moments of loneliness, times when you remember the beautiful parts and wonder if you're being too harsh. You may feel alone, because in the end, the person you once trusted most turned out to be the one who hurt you the deepest. But in that loneliness, you'll find something priceless: the absence of lies. And then peace will begin to return, slowly, like a small flame in the cold night. You'll sleep without waiting for a message. You'll speak your truth without fear of emotional punishment. You'll start to remember who you were, before you were bent into a version that was easier for someone else to accept. You'll realize you didn't lose them, you reclaimed yourself. When the mask is removed, don't pick it up. Leave it there, right where you last placed your trust in something that was never real, and then walk away. No hate, no need to explain, no need to be understood. Just be who you are. The narcissist doesn't fear you screaming in their face. They don't fear betrayal, criticism, or even abandonment. Those things. They've learned how to spin, manipulate, and weaponize to their advantage. The only thing that truly terrifies them, deeply and instinctively, is when you see them for who they really are. Truth doesn't change them, but truth makes them powerless. The narcissist lives inside a world of fantasy. In that world, they are the center, the victim when they need sympathy, the hero when they crave admiration, the misunderstood genius when they want to avoid responsibility. Every role is chosen with precision, and they are never the villain in their own story. But here's the irony. They know they're acting. They know the mask isn't real, and because they know it, they live in constant fear that one day someone will see through their perfectly constructed disguise. When you're the first person who doesn't believe the story they tell about themselves, you strike the very nerve they've spent their whole life hiding. You force them to face the part of themselves they despise the most. The emptiness, because beneath all those roles is a hollow core, a place where no solid self exists, a patchwork identity held together by praise, submission, and emotional dependency from others. And when you pull back your admiration, your trust, your vulnerability to be manipulated, that hollow space starts to echo, and they don't know how to exist without someone to reflect the image they want to be believed. They can't look into a mirror without someone beside them saying, "You're right," because their inner world is not a space full of emotion. It's a dark room they've spent their lives avoiding. You become the first mirror that refuses to reflect the image they chose. And they can't stand that. The narcissist's fear doesn't come from the outside world, it comes from the collapse happening within. They live with a vague, gnawing sense that they are not enough, not lovable, not truly worthy, but they will do everything to avoid ever confronting it. Their ego is a magnificent castle built from paper, and you, the one who once admired, once forgave, once loved, are the first to point out the thin paper walls. You didn't scream, you didn't insult, you just said, "I see who you really are." And to them, that's bankruptcy, total loss, the end of power, because you've seen them and you're not afraid. And if you're not afraid, you're no longer under their control. And if you're no longer controlled, they have no place left in your life. They will try to reclaim that power. They'll probe, test, hoover you with memories, guilt, and "we both made mistakes." They don't want you back out of love. They want you back so they can return to their position of control. They don't fear losing you. They fear losing the version of themselves they created through your eyes. The truth is, narcissists don't have a self in the stable sense. They are a collage of personas, roles, and social feedback collected from others. They exist by reshaping their identity depending on who they're around. And if you refuse to keep affirming that identity, you've cut off their oxygen supply. The death of the illusion to a narcissist is a real death, not of the body, but of identity. And you, with one sentence, one look, one decision to walk away in silence, have done the very thing they feared the most. And here lies the painful but freeing truth. You don't need to destroy them. You just need to no longer be under their spell. That alone is enough for their world to collapse. Escaping a narcissist is a victory, but keeping your freedom afterward That is the true triumph, because the narcissist won't let you go easily. And it's not just them, it's the wounds inside you, the reflexes programmed by that relationship, the habits of self-doubt. They'll all come back in moments of weakness. Freedom is a state you must actively choose, not a gift you receive and tuck away. Here's something you need to understand. They don't have to be present to keep manipulating you. They may be gone, but their voice can still live inside your head. The voice that asks, was I too sensitive? Did I ruin the relationship? Maybe they really loved me, but just didn't know how. Freedom begins when you stop debating those questions. You don't need to answer anything that was formed on a broken foundation. You don't need to make sense of right and wrong with someone who never cared about the truth. And you don't need to justify to yourself why you left. You left, and that's enough because you say it's enough. To stay free, the first thing you must do is let go of the illusion of closure. The narcissist will never give you a sincere apology, a peaceful goodbye hug, or a heartfelt acknowledgement of what they did. If you're still waiting, you're still stuck. They know that, and they use silence or half-truths as a hook to keep you lingering. Understand this, closure doesn't come from them, it comes from you. It comes the moment you decide you don't need any more answers to move forward, when you stop craving a happy ending and start writing a new chapter for yourself. That's when you're free. Next, you must rebuild your inner system, your awareness, your boundaries, your beliefs. No longer the person who tries so hard to understand others that you lose yourself. No longer the one who equates love with suffering. No longer the one who silences intuition just to keep the peace. You're not becoming cold, you're becoming clear. And that clarity is the shield that keeps you from going back. Learn to say no without feeling guilty. Learn to hold your boundaries without needing to explain. Learn to trust your gut before your logic gets distorted by the need to be loved. True freedom isn't forgetting. It's remembering and still not wanting to return. Not because you're bitter, but because you've changed. You begin to build a new relationship with yourself. You're no longer someone who always puts others first, but someone who listens to themselves first. You don't need to be perfect to be loved. You are loved because you've learned how to love yourself. And on this new path, you'll encounter people who are still where you once were, still stuck, still searching for reasons to stay, still believing they're not enough. Because you don't have to save them, but you would be alive just by being, by living freely, kindly, grounded, and no longer haunted by the ghosts of your past. They will see in you what you once thought wasn't real, that it's possible to live without being controlled, without having to perform for approval, without bleeding over things left unsaid. And in your eyes, they will see hope, because you didn't just escape. You built a world where they no longer have permission to enter. And you protect that world every day, every choice, every time you refuse to respond the way you used to. As he put it, freedom is not a destination. Freedom is a way of living, and you are living it, untouchable by manipulation. You once thought your goal was to escape the narcissist, but you've gone far beyond that. You didn't just get out. You woke up. Escape is an action. Awakening is a new essence. And from the very place where you once broke, you are rising, not just as a survivor, but as someone carrying a mission. You are a super empath, not just because you endured deeply, but because you had the courage to look yourself in the mirror and ask, who am I when no one else gets to define me anymore? And you found your answer in the quiet no one else saw, in the sleepless nights, in the moments you chose not to abandon yourself again. Now, you don't need to prove anything. The peace you carry is the loudest evidence of everything you've overcome. You don't need to tell the world you're strong. You are strength because you know what it means to be soft and still not be destroyed. People will sense something different in your presence. Not because you speak loudly, but because you're grounded in a way that cannot be shaken. You no longer react to the emotions others throw at you. You choose what to hold, what to release. And in a world addicted to reflex, that makes you rare. Your legacy is not in what you say, it's in the freedom you live. Every single day, you become a beacon for those still trapped in the dark, not by dragging them out, but by showing them that light is real. You know what it means to love without being consumed. You know what it means to forgive without offering yourself up to be hurt again. You know what it means to believe in people, but no longer blindly. And you, who once questioned your own worth, are now the one who reminds others that they don't need anyone's approval to feel enough. You are the living reminder to the world that sensitivity is not a burden. It's a gift. When paired with awareness, boundaries, and conscious choice, you don't need to be tough to survive. You need to be real, and you have become the realest version of yourself because you no longer live in anyone else's script. The legacy of a super empath isn't about where they came from. It's about the world they create after. A world where manipulation, blame, and control have no place. A world where every connection begins with honesty, respect, and mutual empathy. A world where they don't try to save others, but become a light by which others learn to find their own way out of the dark. And that is what the narcissist will never understand. You didn't just survive to tell the story, you are living to rewrite your life in a way that can never be manipulated again. Maybe you've watched this far in silence. Maybe you've been absorbing every word like it's speaking the truth you've never dared to say out loud. And maybe, deep inside, you're beginning to realize something. You're not the same person anymore. You've stepped out of a cycle others thought was unbreakable. You've spoken what others were too afraid to admit. And you've chosen to live authentically, even when that meant letting go of relationships that once defined you. Not everyone can do that. Not everyone has the courage to face the truth and choose themselves, especially when staying in the pain seems easier, safer. But you took the harder path, the one with no scripts, no masks, no self-betrayal just to keep others around. That's why you're here, not because you're a victim, but because you are living proof of rebirth. You're the evidence that those who've been manipulated, silenced, dismissed for being too kind, too emotional, or too sensitive can come back stronger, clearer, and no longer needing anyone else to validate their worth. Today, you don't need to shout that you're free. You just need to live like you've never been chained. And that is what makes you extraordinary. If this video touched you, leave a comment. It doesn't need to be long. Just one line. I see who they really are. Or, I chose myself. Because when you speak those words, you're not just affirming your awakening, you're giving strength to someone else who's still where you once were. And if you know someone stuck in that same loop, don't try to rescue them. Just share this video. Sometimes, a single sentence, a look, or a moment of recognition is enough to light the path they haven't dared to walk yet. If you want to continue this journey with us, with videos that dive deep into the truth about relationships, psychological dynamics, and the healing process, click subscribe. It's more than a click. It's a declaration. You are not alone. You're building a new life. One that's no longer ruled by fear, no longer confined to a role, no longer shrinking so others can feel big. You are no longer easily wounded. You are someone who knows exactly where your wounds are and still chooses to move forward, not in anger, but in awareness, not to prove anything, but to live truthfully, because the world needs people like you. The world needs super empaths.